Finally.
Fans of 90 Day Fiancé Before the 90 Days tuned in to follow the budding romance between Jeffrey Paschel and his Russian girlfriend, Maria Molina.
I don't want to die.
They were a popular couple until fans learned that Paschel was facing domestic assault charges. He is accused of attacking girlfriend Kristen Wilson in June of 2019.
The fans off the show got together and said, we don't think that Jeffrey should be allowed to tell all because he has a history of domestic violence. And that swayed the producers and was not invited to the tell-all. And we never got to hear if he chose, if he was still with Faria.
Dropped from the season finale, the reality TV star went online and denied the allegations.
I know what happened. You know, I was there.
Paschel told Dominic Nadi, a radio and YouTube host, he was going to fight the charges.
This is all just a ploy. This is all just an agenda to try to make me lose custody of my child.
Paschel is charged with aggravated kidnapping, domestic assault, interfering with an emergency call, and vandalism. According to the arrest affidavit, Wilson said Paschel was in an intoxicated state and assaulted her at her home. Wilson told police he grabbed her by the neck and slammed her head against a wall several times and then thrown to the ground. According to the police report, Wilson was displaying typical symptoms of a concussion, and she was taken to the hospital for further treatment. Police found Paschel at his home. He claimed Wilson's injuries were self-inflicted. Officers arrested Paschel and said that after he was placed in their patrol car, he tried to kick the windows out and needed to be restrained. Paschel says he rejected a plea deal and wants to go to trial to prove his innocence.
And they offered me no punishment whatsoever just to have it on my record. I said no, absolutely not.
All right, we've got a statement tonight from Jeffrey Paschel's attorney. We just got it into the newsroom. Let me read it for you. Our firm has been retained to represent Jeffrey Paschel, who has entered a plea of not guilty and has maintained his innocence throughout the pendency of this matter. Our firm is preparing for Mr. Paschel's trial, and we are in the process of reviewing last-minute discovery that was recently provided by the state and conducting an independent investigation. Mr. Paschel looks forward to his trial set to begin on April 5th. All right, let's bring in from Memphis, Tennessee, criminal defense and civil attorney Jeff Lee. Jeff, great to have you on the show tonight. Watching this man, first of all, knowing that he's voluntarily part of a reality show and voluntarily part of one called 90 Day Fiancé Before the 90 Days, he strikes me as someone who wants to get up on the witness stand and wants to tell his story. Number one, do you think that's going to happen? And number two, how do you think that's going to go over inside the courtroom?
Well, thanks for having me, Vinny. It looks like Mr. Paschel can't resist. I mean, he's already made several statements, probably against the advisement of his attorneys. And certainly the prosecutors are probably going to play those statements to the extent that there are any inconsistencies. But, you know, if he says, I want to tell my story, he really is boxing himself in. People are going to expect him to take a stand.
So what we understand from his story so far, at least it seems, is that the victim in the case, his ex, right, or his then girlfriend, self-inflicted the injuries that she suffered. To me, that's, you know, that's a tough sell. What do you think a jury would have to hear to think that that's a reasonable explanation as to what happened to this woman?
For the jury to consider that somebody's going to inflict harm on themselves, he's really going to have to answer the why question. What is her motive? Is she so driven against him that she's going to commit self-harm? And like you say, that's a tough sell.
Well, the other thing that we heard from Paschel was that there's some sort of a custody battle taking place. And I know from my experience as a prosecutor that the criminal courts were not the most dangerous in the courthouse. The most dangerous are the family court rooms and trials, because that's where emotions take over. Do you think that's going to end up being the focus of this entire case, is what was going on in this custody battle?
Yeah, that speaks to what Mr. Paschel is saying is this ex-girlfriend's motive to do this. And certainly a person in custody hearing is at a real disadvantage to have a pending criminal case. That criminal judge can put bond conditions on having visitation with the children, to the extent that even if Mr. Paschel won custody in the family court, it may still be a violation of bond conditions and he could get arrested for it. So if that is her intention to do that, to jam him up in family court, it's certainly an effective way to do it.
So let's talk about the fact that is who he is. He's got this personality. How, from my perspective in history here at Court TV, is that like celebrities, and I'm talking about, not like through the roof celebrities, but people like Robert Blake, who was, big in the 70s, but had a trial many years later. Somehow, some way, celebrities tend to do well in courtrooms. Do reality stars, do you think they fall into that category of, hey, you know what? Here's someone, I guess, who's comfortable being in the public spotlight, not a bad-looking guy. Maybe he gets some benefit of the doubt. Do you think that translates for a reality television star?
I think it does, Vinny. We've seen studies in courtroom psychology that people know, like, and trust familiar people. Certainly, jurors are going to be told that they can't go home and watch these videos, but they probably already watched them. And they'll say that has no effect on him. But if they're familiar with the show, which painted him in a good light, at least in the beginning, then they're going to like Vinny. And if they don't, to the extent that it's a distraction, then certainly his attorneys are going to take them off the jury so they can't be on it.
Yeah, he was relatively popular before this scandal. I mean, he was liked, and to me that tells you something about the way he may present himself. Tell me how you would cross-examine the victim in this case, because she's going to testify and tell her story. How do you think that cross-examination goes?
If I'm going to start the opening statement and tell the jury, hey, she committed this self-harm because I'm tied to that story, I've got to destroy her on the stand. I've really got to either get her upset to the point where she shows everyone that she has a temper that we didn't see before, or I have to make what she says sound more ridiculous than what Mr. Paschel's saying. She cannot get off the stand until the jury is convinced that she's the kind of person who would do this just to destroy him in custody, or that would actually hurt herself to get back at Mr. Paschel.
All right, I'm going to ask you to take us behind the curtain here a little bit into the world of criminal defense. Here you've got a defendant who was given a relatively good plea offer, but says, I am not entering any plea deal at all. Should we read anything into that? I mean, should we read into it, one step further that, hey, okay, maybe this guy is factually innocent, and maybe someone who doesn't even want to hear about a plea deal is telling the truth?
Well, we've always known that the toughest people to represent can be innocent ones, because even when presented with what other people would consider a very reasonable plea offer, they'll say, I won't take anything. Don't come at me with that offer. So sometimes that really is, a strong evidence for the jury to consider. This guy won't take it. He's here. He wants to tell his story. But yet again, he's boxing himself in. You can't say that and then not get on the stand. Even though you have a constitutional right not to, you've told everybody you want to.
Yeah, I expect him to. I don't think anyone's going to have to twist his arm to get on that witness stand. Jeff Lee, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Vinny.